Thank you for joining Congressman Mark DeSaulnier's virtual end-of-year town hall. My name is Janessa Oriel, and I'm the district director for Congressman DeSaulnier. Tonight, you'll hear from the congressman about House Democrats' efforts over the past year to support the American people, and he will provide a preview of his priorities for 2026. We'll then take some questions live. To ask a question through Zoom, please submit it through the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And to submit questions through YouTube, please ask your questions to the comment section. I will now turn the town hall over to Congressman DeSaulnier.
Thank you, Janessa, and thank you all for joining us. This is our last town hall of the year, as you know, and we're really pleased that so many people have chosen to join us. I am in my office here in the Capitol in Washington, D.C., and we're busy this week, but this is the last week before we go out for 2 weeks, a little over 2 weeks, on end of the year break for the holidays. So it's another pressure-packed period here as my colleagues in the majority try to figure out what do we do about most pressing is the Affordable Care Act tax subsidies, tax credits. What do we do about the fact that if they go away at the end of December, that huge increase to many, many Americans is going to increase their already expensive health care. So we'll talk about that a little bit more, but let's first go to our PowerPoint. I'll try to stay on time and get through this so we can get to as many questions as possible. All right, I've already said all of that, so we'll go to the next one. So this is something we do at every town hall, just explaining that we can't campaign on this town hall. When we do campaign work, we do it outside of taxpayer funding on our campaign side. So if you feel like I'm not being as partisan and emotional as you'd like, that's because that would cross the line. We can be bipartisan, we can be partisan, obviously. As Janessa mentioned, we're going to talk about our efforts in the Democratic minority and what we can do to try to slow some of this down that we see is very detrimental, including what I just talked about for healthcare costs. But we'll also try to work with our colleagues on the other side whenever possible in a principled way to try to get back to a functioning legislative body where we have differences of opinion and represent very different constituents. So that's just the first disclaimer. Next, so this is our current district. This was passed by the voters under redistricting as a result of the Independent Redistricting Commission. For those of you who have followed us or been constituents, our first district, when I was elected 11 years ago, was West County, Contra Costa County, Richmond, El Cerrito, Kensington, San Pablo, and then over to the southern portion was the Danville-San Ramon border, with Danville being the most southernmost part of the district. And then the eastern part of the district was more of the waterfront than this one, and about 20% of Antioch, and then East County. So this district changed, just go back for a second, and it will change again if I am fortunate enough to get elected for the next Congress. Because of Prop 50, this will shift more south, west, and north up to the coastline in Martinez, along the coastline of the Carquinez Bridge, which is more what I've represented in the past, and less of Antioch in particular. Next. So this is just our scorecard. I'm a numbers person in the restaurant business, my previous career vocation. I like to work on profit loss statements, and I like to sort of performance to measure how we're doing. So in the left column is everything we've had in those categories since I came to Congress 11 years ago, and everything we've done in 2025. So I just think this is very proud of the staff, our staff that we have. We've had more town halls than any other member of Congress, we're told, in this period of time, both this year and through the last 11 years. And our constituent services work has been recognized nationally for its excellence. So I really want to thank Janessa and her team and our team here in DC. And the number of bills we've been able to get passed. I always like to tell people, and it's sort of always a surprise to people in the Bay Area, of the 6 terms now that I have been in Congress, which isn't a long time, but it's long enough. That in terms of just being able to get familiar with it and get things done, I'm very proud of the fact that we've got so many bills put into law. That required a good deal of work with Republicans as well, because of the 6 terms I've been here, only one of them did Democrats have the majority in both houses and the White House. Same period of time, the Republicans have had that distinction 2 terms. So we've been a separated government, which is traditional in America. People like to have diffused government. That's the way the founders put the institutions together, but the voters historically like that as well. So we have to work with one another, and it's particularly difficult when the political climate is so partisan, particularly driven, in my view, by the current president of the United States. Next. So one thing we've done in a bipartisan way is community project fundings. These used to be called earmarks. I think when we were in the majority, Rosa DeLauro from Connecticut, wonderful chair when we were in the majority of the Appropriations Committee, put a lot of work, and a lot of us put a lot of work into starting these again, but based on very clear performance standards and accountability. So we've been very successful at this. I should say, normally we have a chart just saying, or a PowerPoint at the beginning that is somewhat biographical, explaining that our committee assignments right now are transportation infrastructure, which I've spent years on, and have been recognized for my work in that. An important part of Contra Costa and Alameda is transportation, quality of life, getting people home to see their kids after long commutes. So on that side, we've been able to do a lot. And then I'm on the Education Labor Committee. On that committee, I am the ranking Democrat chair when we're in charge of the Health, Employment, and Pensions Subcommittee. And then I'm the ranking member on Ethics, which I'm very proud of. So I spend a lot of time on transportation, education, labor and workforce issues, and health, and meant a lot on behavioral health. So we've been able to get $17 million to deploy smart traffic signals with the Contra Costa Transportation Authority, which I was a member of when I was a county supervisor. Great partnership. They're a great group. The governing body is local city council members and a board of supervisors. So really proud of that. We will be the first county in the United States when this is fully deployed, hopefully in the next 2 years, where every streetlight is connected to what's called a transportation management smart system and to the highway system. So every light in the county, particularly the 680-24 corridor, that'll be first, will be connected to our transportation experts at Contra Costa Transportation and with Caltrans. So everything will be connected, and if there are accidents or unusual changes, we'll be able to connect in real time all of this technology. $500,000 for constructing new Head Start facility. This has been a passion for me since I was in county government. Contra Costa County is the largest early education provider in Contra Costa County. Remind people I represent part of Alameda as well, but in Contra Costa, early education is the best investment we can make in this country. We're way behind the rest of the developed world that we know in cognitive development, and we have a great Head Start program in Contra Costa. The county runs those, and it's the county is the largest provider, as I just said, for early education. Huge investment to help kids so that they develop, and when they go off to K-12 and further, and into their lives, they have had the best kind of early development, which neuroscientists now know is very impactful on individual success. And the rest of the developed world knew this and implemented it before us. They didn't know it before us, but they implemented the services before us. $3.5 million to help with infrastructure that helps first responders. That's a program that I put a lot of work into that crosses into my interest in behavioral health. So this is what the county refers to as anytime, anywhere, where you can call 988 if you're involved in some kind of behavioral health situation. Domestic violence happens a lot. And you will have, and I've gone ride-alongs with these folks, you will have health experts be your first responders, and they'll be backed up by the police departments. Much more effective, both for the police departments and for the community. When I did this initiative in the bill that was pushed through, went through, I made sure that every police department, police chief, the sheriff's department supported what we were doing. And now we know that we've implemented this. It's been a really good investment for taxpayers and for public safety and public health. The mobile behavioral health crisis response efforts, that 2 million as well as part of that effort. I've requested 35 million in the current projects. The Appropriations Committee is going through this now, but to be honest, our dysfunction of passing funding has really made the normal process quite disrupted. But we're hoping for more. And if you want a full list of that, you can go to our website. On any of these, if you have questions, we have a website that we keep up to date, and then obviously it can contain more than social media. So if you have questions about details, that's the best way to go. There are people who ask us to engage on social media, but it's more efficient just to direct those folks to our website because they can find a lot of information there. And we work really hard, but we try to be very efficient about that. So this year, you can see on healthcare is a big issue for me, but the big ugly bill, it just is very bad for America's health. And in Contra Costa, it's really bad for us as well, because we really, over the years, with my predecessor's leadership and my involvement and others, we put a lot of money into primary care and prevention. It's a better investment, both for people's quality of lives and our cost. And we'll take a lot of money out of that and put it in a crisis. So I've been out to the emergency rooms at John Muir at the county, and they're going to see business go up as people get sicker because they don't see the doctor sooner. And they don't have health care, so they'll postpone it, and then they'll end up in the emergency room, which is the most inefficient way to deliver health services. Really, really unbelievable. And I've had these conversations with my Republican colleagues. It's like the inefficiency of what they're doing in the American healthcare system is mind-boggling. We could make it more efficient for the taxpayers, for everybody, by just doing what we've been doing, is move to primary care and prevention, and then make sure we get rid of the inefficiencies in the system, like PBMs, pharmaceutical benefit managers, which is just a ripoff. And I have a bill with a Republican colleague who would take care of that. And it increases the national debt by more than $3 trillion. Again, for my Republican colleagues, for a party that used to be under Reagan, it was supposed to be fiscally responsible. This is just incredibly irresponsible. And the last bullet, it's the greatest shift of wealth in the history of the country, at a time when there's already the greatest concentration of wealth and inequality in the history of the country, worse than the Gilded Age. So we're going to give $1 trillion in tax cuts over 10 years to the top 1%. Those are people who make over $7 million a year. And for the people who are maybe losing their health care because of the increases to the tax credits under the ACA, they will be paying more money every month, but we'll be giving $100,000 a year in tax cuts to the top 1%. More concentrated for the wealthiest people. It doesn't make sense to me. So this goes to the tax credit and the premium increases. I've covered a lot of this, but the average premium in the bottom there, we don't have it highlighted, but 97% increase for most Americans. And you can see how it's skewed towards against working people, towards the wealthiest. These people don't need any more money. It's just really obscenely wealthy people getting more, in my view, at the expense of everyone else. Next. So we've had some wins on our side. We were able to get Republicans to sign on to a discharge petition. A lot of work went into this because Republicans did not want to be on record voting against the president's wishes. At the end, all but one member of Congress voted to direct the Justice Department to release the Epstein files. We knew it was going to take a while because they're fighting this in the Department of Justice, so that's going to be battled out in the courts and is. Ultimately, we're hoping soon that'll all be released. I'm really curious as to what's in it because I don't understand why the president is so afraid of just having it released to public. We've seen photographs that the Oversight Committee Democrats have released. If a Democrat's been involved in this, they should have to explain themselves. So Bill Clinton has pictures, he should have to explain himself, same as everyone else. But to get to the details, I really don't understand their reluctance to be more forthcoming about it, how much pressure the president put on Republicans not to vote for it. We were able to get enough Republicans to vote for the discharge petition. It's a way to get through the blockage by the speaker. That worked. We got them on record. They chose to vote against the pressure from the White House. And then, of course, the president all of a sudden changed his mind, said it should be released. But his Justice Department here still fighting against the courts to have it released. And we just had a success this last week on through a discharge petition. The president had said that federal employees didn't have a right to bargain under the National Labor Relations Board Act. That was in court. We believe we would have won in court. We were, but this bill just tells them and sets the record straight and had Republican votes a lot to say that what he did was illegal. And that's going to play out in court. But in addition to that, we passed a bill that said it is in fact illegal, and you should change that. He's going to fight it, but we're going to keep working on the process. And the courts weren't made for this, to be quite frank. We're going to have another PowerPoint on that, but they're very deliberative. That's the way the system was set up. I wish they were faster in this instance. But this goes to what I'm talking about. There have been 217 executive orders. So the president can sign an executive order, but that doesn't mean it's legal. It's not a fiat. He's not a king. So he can't just break laws that were passed by the Congress and signed by a president. If you want to change those laws, you go back through the process and change it through a bill and get him all the way through the legislative process, and then he can sign them. He can't just do that on his own. No president can. So we have been very effective. We and our partners have been very effective at stopping these or slowing them down. You can see in the first 4 years, our group, I just came from a meeting of our litigation task force, the Rapid Response Task Force in our caucus led by Joe Neguse, a very good lawyer from Colorado, and Jamie Raskin, nationally respected constitutional lawyer from Harvard. They've been leading this effort. In this time, and if you're curious about how these are going, I would recommend, I had a town hall with the executive director of Democracy Forward. They're a nonprofit bipartisan organization that's just tracking all of these. So you can Google Democracy Forward and go onto their website and their social media, and they will tell you in real time every single case and where it is. A few weeks ago, we had won over 95% of the cases in this first year of his second term. So President of the United States doesn't make law, Congress makes law, and he signs the laws. He can't unmake them. And the courts have to fill their role as a third branch of government and say, no, you can't do that, Mr. President. And they're doing it. Almost 80% the first 4 years and over 90% now. Doesn't say much for the President of the United States when he's losing in court so much. So again, we're fighting. These are the amicus briefs, so where we join on. We have supported I just mentioned the litigation rapid response team, which I just came from a meeting of. We've prevented him from dismantling the Department of Education, the clean energy, our leadership in California, which I've been very involved with, including when I was a local government and registered as a Republican, as a member of the California Resources Board, everything we're doing. So we're fighting in court, but we're fighting based on law, not ignoring the law, and we're winning. Next. That last bullet on the previous one, just the National Guard around the country, but particularly in California and LA. He's been ordered he didn't have the authority to put those soldiers where he put them. So let's see, in 2015, I've authored 39 bills below. This is a very difficult to get stuff done here, right? Much easier to get bills passed in the legislature and what we call board orders in the county board for a variety of reasons, but it's hard. You've got 535 members 100 senators, 435 members of the House. Process is very deliberative and it requires you to really work to get these done. And that's as the founders wanted it, and it requires deliberation and partnering. But given we've been in charge for 2 of the years I've been here, I think we've been quite successful and good. Some of these we haven't moved, but we've wanted to just put in there. One is CEO Accountability and Responsibility Act. This is a bill that I authored actually originally in the legislature with former Labor Secretary Bob Reich as one of the architects of it. San Francisco and Los Angeles are about to do this locally, where if you're making over 300%, this is all has to be reported to the Department of Labor based on Dodd-Frank, a bill passed some years ago. They have to report their compensation on publicly traded companies between their corporate leadership and their workforce. For years and years, it was about 30% higher. Now it's over 1,000 times higher. So this bill would have the effect of taxing that wide disparity and bringing it down. We're hoping to rebuild the American middle class the way it was during the Eisenhower administration by doing a series of these bills to deal with that inequality. So our kids will have more opportunity. And this is really a dangerous place we're in terms of concentration of wealth. If you read Thomas Piketty's work, if you really are, you can read economists, but the history of this level of concentration is a very unhealthy thing for any country or culture. Gun safety has been a very important thing for me since my dad took his life in 1989 with a handgun that we never were able to find out how he got it. But I've done a number of bills at every level of government. I'm proud of what we've been able to do in Contra Costa County in the legislature, where we have some of the most stringent and effective gun violence prevention laws in the country. And it shows in terms of the level of gun violence in our county and in the country. The problem is that over 50% of the guns used in violence in California have come from other states. So that's why we need national legislation. The last bullet is just timely on that. HOV lanes that expired. So if you had a zero emission vehicle, we'd incentivize that growing part of our vehicle fleet. 25% of the cars sold last year in the Bay Area were battery electric zero emission vehicles. They're the future. I have one. I think it's a great car. I've been involved with them for a long time, given my background in air quality. So that HOV lane expired by federal law at the end of the year. I have a bill, and I'm working with Republicans that would reinstitute that, hopefully through the appropriations process. So you'll be able to use those again. They're very effective in many ways. There's a time where you probably don't need them, but now is not the time. Okay, next. So these are just priorities. The Voting Rights Act, we're very concerned about the Supreme Court, what they might do to the Voting Rights Act. The bipartisan background checks, we want that for gun safety, protecting the right to organize. There's a real effort here by very conservative Republicans against working people in the union movement. We're having a hearing on it in a day or two in the Educational Labor Committee. We want to fight that. Next. So these are just general priorities for next year. Really working on healthcare, behavioral health, try to make sure prescription drug costs make the system more efficient. And I'm working with Republicans. Why would anybody be against making it more efficient? America has the most expensive healthcare system in the world, and for developed countries, the worst outcomes in terms of longevity, acuity, long-term sickness. So we can look at other countries and get rid of a lot of the waste in our healthcare system. I already mentioned prescription benefit managers. There's a lot of others. So improve the efficiency, help with those drug costs. We did a lot with that during those 2 years we were in charge to drop the cost of prescription drugs. And then holding the executive branch accountable. This is why we have 3 branches of government. Okay, let's go to questions.
Thank you, Congressman. We will now move to the question and answer portion of the town hall, as you mentioned. As a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen on Zoom, or submit your question in the YouTube comments. Just a moment as I move to the questions. Excellent. The first question we received is from an anonymous viewer on Zoom. Why isn't anyone calling out the administration for Hatch Act violations?
Well, we are. It's frustrating in this environment where people get so much information from social media. Social media has the potential to be really good for civic involvement, but losing people reading traditional media, print, newspapers, local news in particular, is a problem. So the Hatch Act, trying to make sure that people adhere to that and a lot of other laws. We are, but we're in the minority. So the majority doesn't want to look at the Hatch Act and a lot of other things. In Congress, as I've explained before, unlike other legislative bodies, the Speaker has total control over the budget in the House, in the budget nationally, what committee hearings you have, and how you disperse information. Not complete control in that last one. We still have opportunities like this, obviously. So a lot of these things, when you're in the minority, it's really hard to get your message out. I think we need to do more, but it's hard to do. We do more. We're going to do more of what's called shadow hearings. This is one of the reasons I do so many town halls, both in person and this way, to make sure that my words are being described or given out in a way that you can hear me. So we can get you more information of what we're trying to do, specifically on the Hatch Act and on other things.
Great, thank you. The next question is from Frank on Zoom. Please discuss the discharge petition rights of us as citizens.
Well, you get the right to vote. That's the most important thing. And you get the right to see what's happening. So a discharge petition is a way to get around that log jam when you have a speaker who refuses to move anything. So if I write a bill, all those bills I mentioned earlier and more, I literally take it down to what's called the hopper. Some of you have heard the expression, it's in the hopper. That's from the old wooden piece of furniture, basically, that's down at the speaker's podium in the House of Representatives. You submit it in there, the clerk takes it, and then you may never see it again if the speaker doesn't want to. In California legislature, for instance, you submit one and it has to go to the Rules Committee for a public hearing. If Legislative Council says it's legal and constitutional. And then the Rules Committee has to have a reason in the legislature to not have it move further. And it's a vote. You can see it here. That doesn't happen. If you submit a bill, this goes back to the previous question as well. So the one way around that is for a member to introduce a petition, a discharge petition. You have a name for it, subject matter, and you take it down to the hopper, you put it in, and then it's there. And you physically have to go down and sign your name to that. And the clerk is a notary and they make sure it's you. And then when you get to 218, the speaker is required by rules that within 7 days, he has to notice that. And then it has to have a vote for it 2 days later. This is why the discharge petition for Epstein was so important and so telling that they wouldn't provide over the course of multiple discharge petitions, 3 to 5 vote or signatures, just so you could get to the 218. So that's the process. The citizens have the right to follow that online as the process goes through, but that's pretty much what it is in the simplest way. We can get you the direct language if you'd like, and you can send us, if we've got your contacts, we can forward you the language, or you can go on the House website, and I'm fairly certain you can find it there.
The next question is a related question from Pamela on YouTube. With how ineffective the current speaker is in bringing bills, will Democrats continue to use the discharge petition, or can they work to get a new speaker?
Well, the only way to get a new speaker is to have the votes. And the only way a Democrat's going to be a speaker, most likely, it'd be very unusual for Republicans to come over and make one of us speaker, because they would be primaried and it would be quite ugly for them. So we've got to win elections. Speaker Johnson loses a majority of his caucus, and they can put a motion to vacate the chair anytime they want, and then the process starts to have another vote. So any member can start that process. And there's lots of rumors that may happen anytime because he's got a very difficult group of people to keep together. You never saw this when Nancy Pelosi was Speaker. She was a master at this. Full disclosure, she's a friend. I respect her greatly, but she knew what she was doing. And there were Republican speakers who similar like that. The one I served with was John Boehner, who was a legislator. He was conservative, but he knew the system. He knew how to lead people and lead a large group of opinionated people. Speaker Johnson does not have that expertise. He's been here, I think, 2 years longer than I, and that's the sum of his legislative experience. So he's got a difficult job, and he's not, in my view, very well prepared for it to be Speaker, period. So you remember how all that happened, the Freedom Caucus and Kevin McCarthy, and after John Boehner. John Boehner was the last Republican effective speaker we had, in my view, and I got to serve with him a couple of years. He was very good friends with George Miller. They both were senior members of the Education and Labor Committee, and they worked together to get things done, knowing and respecting that they had very different political perspectives. That's how the system's supposed to work. So the Wall Street Journal reporter and the public TV reporter both came up to me last week and said, okay, you were the one who started all this with discharge petitions. Did you ever think it would get like this? They were alluding to a petition I did some years ago that when the Republicans were taking us to the brink of defaulting on our credit, which would have really hurt the American economy and the global economy. So I did a discharge petition as the vice chair of the Rules Committee to get around that. And while I never got the signatures, it did help get the leadership of the Republicans to say, uh-oh, if he gets the signatures, they're just going to roll us. So they extended the credit limit so that we could continue to service our debt and not have countries in our country be in default, which at that point you're on the verge of going into insolvency and bankruptcy. So we did that. Now it's become more and more common, and this was the perspective of those two reporters. I don't like it. In a functioning legislative body, and I told the Wall Street Journal reporter this, I haven't seen a story done on it yet. We wouldn't need a discharge petition if we had legislators in positions of power in the Republican Party. We would be working together through a transparent legislative process, which this institution has had for years. And people will be able to follow it, and you wouldn't have to go around leadership. But we are very, very historically dysfunction Congress right now, and I would lay 95% of the blame on the speaker and the current leadership. If you're in the majority and the speaker, you're supposed to lead, knowing that it's difficult to get people to come on the same page. Nancy Pelosi did it. John Boehner did it. Mike Johnson seems incapable of doing it.
Excellent, thank you. The next question is from Margie on YouTube. Why are the roadsides now so dirty? Have funds been decreased?
Well, that's more of a state function, Margie, as having been in the legislature and chaired the Assembly Transportation Committee and the Senate Transportation Committee. I have a historic little footnote that I like. I was the first freshman member ever to be chair of the Assembly Transportation Committee. Most of the roadside stuff is done by Caltrans and local government. However, they get funds from the federal government to help with that. Those funds have not been cut yet, but under the current process we're going through in appropriations, they would be cut. So if they're dirtier, it's a variety of issues. If you've got specifics, why don't you send us where you're seeing a lot of it, and we'll make sure to contact our colleagues in local government, the state government, to see if there's a particular problem. I would tell you one thing, when you have this level of inequality, people start disposing of their garbage on the streets, and we've had a struggle with this for some time in Contra Costa, particular in poor communities, because it's just expensive to live. So in that case, the county has to go out and pick them up, and that costs taxpayers money.
The next question comes from Bridget on Zoom. Is the judicial process still the best way to stop Trump?
For right now, yes. And Democracy Forward is a good, also the Brennan Center for Law. Those are two nonprofit IRS. They have to be bipartisan institutions that help with this. My lights just went out. I thought we took care of this. I'm in the dark. I'll do Pilates and it'll come back on. So it is the best way. And then I always tell people I'd love to go out to the Indivisible and Resistors peaceful protest in Walnut Creek and Concord all over. I haven't been able to look the last couple of weeks, but that's also important. Expressing yourself in a peaceful, nonviolent way is part of the American tradition. It's how this country started. So Stamp Act, people got out and protested. So all of these things are important to keep our democracy. And then elections, of course, are paramount to that. So we've got the midterm elections just next November. So those will be very determinant. I can tell you my colleagues in the White House are following the polling. And if that election happened today, they would lose very badly, as they should.
Excellent. The next question comes from someone anonymous on Zoom. Could you address the issues involving members of Congress and activity in stock trading?
Yeah, there's been a number of bills. I completely support them. And if you're in this position of responsibility, it's a sacred trust. We should not be involved in stock trading. You should either get rid of them or put them in a blind trust, put them in money markets, anything that keeps you separated from that completely, and not be involved. It's an inherent conflict of interest. And again, it's part of the reason we have this really obscene inequality and concentration of wealth right now. There are too many people in positions of power in Congress and their friends outside of them controlling the democracy right now. Democracy is for sale and it's barely hanging on, in my view. So Nancy Mace, very conservative Republican, has a discharge petition to this effect. I'm happy to support any legislation that would just prohibit it. As a ranking member on ethics, it's just if there's an interesting book recently about the pursuit of happiness. It's authored by the head of the Constitutional Center in Philadelphia, just talking about how to the founders of this country who read the Romans and the Greeks about democracy is if people don't trust their elected officials, then the system doesn't work. If elected officials don't trust each other, it doesn't work. Historically, used to be said in the California legislature and here, for a member, your word is your bond. Well, when people are trading stocks, public companies, when they are also governing that, it doesn't work. It's an inherent conflict of interest. I'm sorry to go on so long, but it's a great question. I feel very, very, very strongly it should be prohibited. You have a sacred trust if you're a member of Congress.
Excellent, thank you. The next question comes from Jim on Zoom. Thank you for your past support of the Global Fund to fight AIDS, TB, and malaria. Will you continue your support in the coming year and support including language to preclude rescissions?
Yes. So we have bills, I believe I'm co-sponsors of them, which I'm a part of it. There are a lot of bills. We get a lot of bills introduced here, so keeping up with the strategy from the lead authors on them. But it's very, very important. And by the way, this is a great investment. What they've done what this administration has done to cutting foreign aid in health and nutrition is immoral, unethical, and it's really stupid. This gives us enormous goodwill around the world, and they're efficient. Feeding and helping poor countries get to the point where people can work and take care of themselves is one of the great American traditions when we're doing things right. So yes, I would support it. And as for AIDS, what he's done to that and other communicable diseases contradicts what George W. Bush was very proud of and what he did with AIDS and bipartisan efforts in the past. So I completely would continue to support it and will do everything I can to get that money in place and can't be rescinded, and do the analysis so the American public can see what we get from it besides the moral and ethical benefit we get from it, the goodwill it sows around the world, but it's also a good investment for American taxpayers.
Thank you. The next question comes from Peter on YouTube. If enough Republicans resign before the midterms, and if the president is impeached, would the VP also be impeached?
Those are separate actions. So if the president was impeached, the VP would replace him. So if everything you said took place, then if the VP was impeached, the speaker, who, if we were in the majority, would be a Democrat, would become president of the United States. I think that's a pretty big reach, but it's possible.
The next one comes from Bridget on Zoom. A large number of Americans are frustrated and claim that Congress does not do enough to limit the authority of Donald Trump. Apparently that's not a question, it's a statement. I don't see a question associated with that, so sorry. Would you like to comment based on that statement?
You know, it is frustrating. It's frustrating to be in the minority and fight like hell every day here to stop this and do it strategically, but also demonstratively. Now, it's the first question about the Hatch Act. It's getting information out. I will tell you, this is a different world than people in Congress were in 10, 20 years ago, because professional journalists used to provide information that people got out their front doorstep every day and went and listened to Walter Cronkite. That's not the world we live in. Prospectively, it could be better, but right now it's really hard. And there's a lot of research and good books on the subject, but it's really, really important how we as citizens get information. So we fight like hell, but ultimately it's the electorate. The current president of the United States got elected, as opposed to what he said about President Biden, where he lied about it being stolen. He got elected. I'm not happy with that, but the voters decided that. Also, the voters under our constitutional system, which has a lot of things that need to be looked at in this redistricting, gerrymandering, things like that. But they're in the majority because they won elections. We have to win elections. And on a separate town hall, I could talk about the things I think we should do better as Democrats to win elections. But this is the constitutional system we are legally sworn an oath to. And I believe in that oath. Abraham Lincoln, who I love dearly and have read every book, and there's lots of them on it, and gone through all the moments in his life to try to figure out how did this person become the person he was. He used to say about his oath when people were challenging him to do things that were unconstitutional during the Civil War. He said, I signed an oath under God. And he said that was a sacred oath. So we got to win elections, folks, and then we got to fight the way we are fighting. Sorry to go on, but it's frustrating. And I agree with you. We're fighting like hell, but you don't always get that information, and we got to win elections. And we're about to win one in a big way in a year if all things continue the way they are.
Great, thank you. The next question comes from Alan on YouTube. What confidence do you have that the DOJ will release the entire Epstein file on the 19th?
I don't trust the current Department of Justice. It's a corrupt Department of Justice, in my view. We're in a very corrupt environment in this administration, my view. But what I'm counting on is the people who are partners at the courts. And the courts have been good, as I mentioned earlier, in all of these issues. So I feel pretty confident right up to the Supreme Court. But the Supreme Court is also one of the most corrupt, in my view, Supreme Courts in terms of how they interpret the laws. So we just got to keep fighting, folks. But I think the pressure is there because, as Lincoln also said, with public sentiment, anything's possible. Without it, nothing is. So as long as the American public keeps insisting on it, Republicans and Democrats, the Department of Justice will be forced to release them. Whether they are truthful and accurate about that will be seen.
Great. The next two questions are related. So I'll start with the first, but know that the second one will be in a similar vein. The next question is from Wendy on Zoom. Is there scrutiny in the House over the enormous wealth being aggregated by the Trump family?
Yes, again, we're doing as much as we can through the Oversight Committee specifically, and about all of us, to use our staff to watch this. I will tell you when we win the midterms, there will be a lot of Oversight Committee hearings and other committees. I was on the Oversight Committee for 8 years. I'd love to be back on it when we're in the majority. To subpoena people to come under oath with very good investigatory tools to get to the bottom of everything. We are right now, but again, folks, we got to win elections and we got to fight them with everything we've got in the meantime. So there is scrutiny, but the majority party is a partner to the criminality, where that's my word, from my perspective, of the current administration and their partners.
The next question was from somebody anonymously on Zoom. How do you envision the huge imbalance of wealth being corrected? The very wealthy already own much of the economy. They are successfully simply buying up media and news outlets. Those of us who are worried about democracy are literally being silenced by money.
Yep, this is the essence of our problem. Read Thomas Piketty, read Joseph Stiglitz, read Bob Reich. I've read them all. I've talked to them all. Never Piketty, but indirectly. The concentration of wealth in this country is a sickness. As Piketty says, in the history of mercantile capitalistic countries, when it gets this level, people don't like it. And there's an implosion, either civil war or hopefully you solve it peacefully through the legislative governmental process. But I can't, this is the number one question we have. And the fact that the wealthiest amongst us in the Republican Party wants more money, what do they do with this money? I mean, I grew up in the Catholic faith. Having enough for your family and your community and your country is enough. This concentration of wealth is obscene, and it's a global problem, and they're bending the rules every way they can. So we have to stop this. It's the number one important thing. I've had hour-long sessions on the floor that I've led about this. It's all bad. We've got to stop it. And the way you stop it is a series of bills, and I have what I call the New Deal that I work with others on. You end stock buybacks. They never used to be legal. And if you have them, they have to be, the funds cannot be all taken by the stockholder. It's got to be shared by the consumers and by the employees. You change the tax rate back to where it was during the Eisenhower administration. Very simple. Both the corporate tax rate and the individual tax rate. They have obscenely, the Republicans in the big ugly bill, made estate taxes. So all of this billions of dollars, these people, it's like royalty. They pass it on to their kids, like the Trump family, and these people think they're geniuses. Some of them may be, but just inheriting a lot of money, this is why we formed this country, was because we didn't believe in inherited wealth governing the country. And here we are back at it again. The estate tax is such an awful thing, what they just did. So all of these things, we have a whole series, stock buybacks, changing one of the biggest things. I always say, if you just had President Eisenhower's Congress and presidency, we'd start rebuilding the middle class. We have to be more aggressive about it, because all the damage in the last 30 years that's happened to the middle class and poor people, except for the top 1%, who are people who make over $7 million a year. And all of that is in investments. And as Lincoln famously said, and others have said, wages, labor, and equity has to always be balanced in a democracy. And if equity investments ever gets much higher, you've lost democracy. Well, that's pretty much the way it is right now. So I'm happy to share more with you. I spend hours on this with experts. We have to change this. Our kids are going to be in a very, very difficult place. As hard as it is right now, I fear for this country at this level of obscene concentration of wealth and their insatiable demands to make more money. And I grew up learning that you can't take it with you. Well, these people aren't going where I hope to go, but they can't take it there either.
Thank you. The next question comes from Jane on Zoom. What are you and others doing to stop the damage being done to the CDC by RFK Jr. to reverse years of scientific work and guidance?
This is another priority for me as a survivor of stage 4 cancer. I'm glad I'm here sitting in front of you, but I'm here because of what the NCIS, National Cancer Institute, did to provide me with the treatment that I have that keeps me living, keeps me healthy. My immune system is superior right now to somebody my age, in spite of having that cancer still in my system, although almost negligible or impossible to detect. So all of that came from American taxpayers at the National Institutes for Health, the premier medical research in the history of our species. For every dollar that goes into the Cancer Institute, I spoke about this on the floor in this appropriations bill, they want to cut $1 billion from Cancer Institute. So as the founder of the Cancer Survivors Caucus here and somebody deeply involved in healthcare, We have to protect these beautiful institutions that have extended life for Americans. So the National Cancer Institute, I just had somewhat of a debate with Chip Roy from the Freedom Caucus in Texas on this, and he said, well, we don't want to waste money. I said, well, for every $1 taxpayers pay into the National Cancer Institute, you get $2.63 back for lives that are saved and people continue to be productive. Who wouldn't vote for that? Well, Republicans won't vote for that. They want to cut that. So I don't know, but I'm fighting like hell to get them to change their mind and not do it. Similarly, at CDC, they're doing the same thing. So there'll be more communicable disease, and the current Secretary of Health and Human Services needs some help in his worldview and denying science. We have brilliant researchers at these institutions, having been out there multiple times and talked to them. They're the best and the brightest, and when they're working there, they're not getting paid a lot of money. And they're saving people's lives every day, but you wouldn't know it. But we've got to protect this. Thank you for the question. As you can tell, I feel very passionately about this. Americans should be unbelievably proud of what the National Institutes for Health have done to our species and for this country.
The next question comes from Jonathan on Zoom. Do you think there will be another government shutdown once the CR expires?
All right, the CR, so December 31st, the tax credits expire. So that's what we're under right now. Are the Republicans going to introduce a bill that will help with all of the people who will lose their health care because they'll let them expire? And then on January, the last day of January 2026, the CR expire. I don't see any indication from my colleagues, and I have conversations with them. What are you going to do? Let's have a discussion right now in the old traditional way of bargaining and figure out how we do what's right for the American public and for this country. Living under CR to CR is incredibly destructive to your lives. It's not, something that is esoteric to budget people here. It is that, but how would you like to plan on every month having a landlord who said they wouldn't, even though you're paying everything and you're doing everything right, they didn't know whether they'd let you keep living where you are. You can't live like that. Not a country with the largest economy in the history of the human species.
Great. We have time for probably one or two more questions. So we'll start with someone anonymously asked on YouTube, is there any consideration for term limits for Supreme Court justices?
There have been bills. I've been a co-sponsor of them. So I don't believe in term limits in an ideal world, but certainly on the Supreme Court and the federal bench, we have to look at this. The current corruption on the Supreme Court, I used the word earlier, criminality, certainly corruption. If you can Google the relationship that Clarence Thomas and others have on the Supreme Court with people who have benefited from their decisions, is really quite extraordinary and shouldn't happen. So we have to do something about the Supreme Court as well. They have way too much power right now, and they're pretty brazen about their interpretations of, in my view, of cases that come in front of them. And we're about to have a few. If what it looks like they're going to do, the Voting Rights Act, the way to change the Voting Rights Act after all these years and courts upholding it is to come back through the legislative process, not have 9 people in the Supreme Court fairly arbitrarily just throw it out. They could have done that years ago, but they didn't. They kept it.
Excellent. The next question comes from Paula on Zoom. What can the Epstein files possibly reveal that will change support of Trump? He's already committed sedition, so what can be worse?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a great question. I thought in his first term, all the things that he was found guilty of, including the felony charges in New York, that would be enough to disqualify anybody for a job, much less President of the United States, but yet voters reelected him. I don't know what's in those files, but I tell you what my instincts tell me. It goes back to the questions about inequality and the entitlement by wealthy Americans, in this case, wealthy American men, to feel like anything is theirs, even people's daughters. So I think that is a line too far, as it should be for all Americans. If you're running around doing what we've read about so far, again, whether it's Democrats or Republicans, you can't have people abusing their power. against people who are powerless to defend themselves or very powerless. So that's what I think it's going to show us, that there was this sense of entitlement, and it was demonstrated in many obscene ways by very wealthy men and women, but primarily men. And I think when the American public, Republicans and Democrats, see what they've already known, this is why the polling's so strong, that that's finally a line too far. Should have happened a long time ago, but Lord Acton famously said, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. America is very sick right now. The corruption and the entitlement, power corrupts, as Lord Acton said, and absolute power, which a lot of these people feel they have over everyone, including your children, corrupts absolutely. So it breaks my heart that we've come to this in this country, but we've got to fix it, folks.
Thank you, Congressman. Would you like to provide final thoughts?
I just want to really, really thank you. It's been a wonderful town hall. It reinforces my belief that I'm so lucky to be here and to represent the people I do. It's really a sacred trust, as I said earlier. But only about 14,000 Americans have ever had the honor to be a member of Congress as I do. It can be terribly trying and discouraging, but democracy's worth it. As Lincoln said, this jewel of an idea that you can provide opportunity for everyone, I'm paraphrasing, is worth fighting for. He said that during the Civil War. So imagine going through all of that. This is actually inscribed on the wall of a great place, if you're ever in DC, to go see. It's called Lincoln's Cottage, the soldier's home. It's where he spent about 25% of his time in the White House, up outside the White House, because you got away from, to be honest, the sewer in the summertime that was DC. So I went up to this place. It's a veteran's home, and he could sit there, and when he was writing the Emancipation Proclamation, no air conditioning, the windows are open for a breeze. The hospital next door during the Civil War was providing surgery, and the graveyard in front of it was burying Union soldiers. Imagine him sitting there and writing that, hearing all that, seeing all that, and he was responsible for it. Well, when he said such a jewel is worth fighting for, he said it up there. You can go up there. It's incredibly inspiring. So for me to have the opportunity to be here at this point in my life is a great, great responsibility, but also a great gift. So I want to thank you so much. Thank you for taking an hour out to just joining us for something as simple as a town hall with your representatives. I'm not perfect, but I work hard at being the best representative I can, because I have such a deep respect for what the founders of this country attempted to do and people like Lincoln had fought for. And we have to keep doing that. Folks, irrespective of what title we have, the most important one is citizen of the United States. And we've all got to fight to maintain this for future generations, just like Lincoln did all those years ago, sitting in that room, writing that sacred document. Thank you. Have a wonderful, wonderful holiday, and God bless America.
Excellent. Thank you, Congressman. The town hall will be available on our YouTube and Facebook pages if you'd like to watch it again or share it with your friends. Please do not hesitate to call our office if we can be of any help to you. Thank you again for joining us today, and have a great evening.